The
We must
morning
address
sun
this
cast
now.
long
The
shadows across
consequences
the
are too
pristine
grave to
gardens of
ignore.
Rosewood Palace as Catherine, Duchess of Rosewood, sat in her private study reviewing correspondence. The familiar scent of jasmine drifted through the open windows, and she could hear the distant laughter of her children playing in the courtyard below. It was supposed to be a quiet Tuesday morning, much like any other in her carefully orchestrated royal schedule. Catherine had grown accustomed to the rhythm of palace life during her husband's frequent diplomatic missions. Prince Alexander had been away for nearly 3 weeks this time, attending a series of international summits across Europe. Their phone calls had become shorter and less frequent as his schedule intensified, leaving Catherine to manage both her royal duties and their 3 young children largely on her own. She paused in her reading, glancing at the silver-framed photograph on her desk that showed Alexander in his military dress uniform on their wedding day 7 years ago. His warm smile and kind eyes had captured her heart then, just as they did now. Even after all these years of marriage and the demands of royal life, she still felt that flutter of excitement when she thought about his return. The palace had been unusually quiet since Alexander's departure. The children missed their father terribly, asking each morning when Papa would be coming home. 8-year-old Princess Isabella had been particularly sensitive about his absence, while 6-year-old Prince James had taken to wearing his father's old military cap around the palace. Little Prince Thomas, barely 3, still looked for his father at bedtime each night. Catherine had thrown herself into her royal duties to keep busy during Alexander's absence. She had visited 3 hospitals, opened a new children's center, and attended numerous charity galas. The press had praised her dedication and poise, noting how gracefully she handled solo appearances. But behind the polished public facade, she missed her husband deeply. The morning schedule included a visit to the local primary school, where she would be reading to children as part of the National Literacy Campaign. Her lady-in-waiting, Lady Margaret, had already laid out her outfit, a cheerful blue dress that would photograph well and appeal to the young audience. Catherine appreciated these lighter engagements that allowed her to connect with people on a personal level away from the formal protocols of state functions. As she reached for her teacup, Catherine noticed her phone lighting up with an incoming call. The caller ID showed Alexander's private number, and she felt her heart skip a beat. Their scheduled calls usually came in the evening, and it was unusual for him to ring so early in the morning. She hoped nothing was wrong with his diplomatic mission. "Good morning, darling." Alexander's familiar voice came through clearly, though he sounded tired. "I hope I didn't wake you." "Not at all," Catherine replied, setting down her papers and giving him her full attention. "The children and I were just starting our day. How are the summit meetings going?" Alexander paused for a moment before responding, and Catherine could hear voices and movement in the background. "Actually, that's why I'm calling. There's been a change in the schedule. The final meeting was moved up, and we finished all our business yesterday evening." Catherine felt a mix of relief and excitement. If the meetings were finished, perhaps Alexander would be coming home earlier than expected. The original plan had him returning late Thursday evening, but if everything was concluded, "That's wonderful news," she said. "Does this mean you might be able to come home Wednesday instead of Thursday?" Alexander chuckled softly, and Catherine could hear the smile in his voice. "Actually, my dear, I have an even better surprise for you. I'm already at the airport, and my flight lands in about 4 hours." Catherine nearly dropped her phone. 4 hours? You mean you'll be home this morning? If traffic cooperates, I should be walking through her front door right around lunchtime, Alexander confirmed. "I wanted to surprise you and the children. I missed you all terribly." A wave of joy and excitement washed over Catherine. She had been mentally preparing for 2 more days without Alexander, and suddenly, he would be home before the day was half over. Her mind immediately began racing through all the adjustments this would require to her schedule. "Oh, Alexander, this is the most wonderful news," she said, standing up and beginning to pace around her study. "The children will be absolutely thrilled. James has been sleeping with your old military cap every night, and Isabella drew you a picture yesterday that she's been saving to show you. And how are you holding up, my love? Alexander asked, his voice gentle and concerned. I know these solo weeks are difficult for you, managing everything on your own. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes at his thoughtful question. I'm fine, truly. Busy but fine, though I have missed our evening conversations terribly. The palace feels so empty without you here. Well, that's about to change, Alexander said. I can't wait to hold you again, Catherine. These diplomatic trips are important, but being away from my family never gets easier. After ending the call, Catherine sat back in her chair, her heart racing with excitement and her mind spinning with sudden plans. She needed to cancel her school visit, rearrange her afternoon meetings, and figure out how to surprise the children with their father's early return. She also wanted to plan something special for Alexander's homecoming, though she only had a few hours to organize it. The first person she called was Lady Margaret, who answered immediately despite the early hour. Your Grace? Is everything all right? Everything is perfect, Margaret, Catherine said, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. Prince Alexander is coming home today instead of Thursday. His flight lands in 4 hours. There was a pause before Lady Margaret responded, and Catherine could almost hear her reorganizing the day's schedule in her mind. How wonderful! I'll need to contact the school about your visit this morning and reschedule your afternoon appointments. Would you like me to arrange something special for His Royal Highness's return? Yes, actually I would, Catherine said. Nothing too elaborate, but perhaps we could have Cook prepare his favorite meal for lunch. And maybe you could coordinate with the children's tutor so they could be free when he arrives. Of course, Your Grace. I'll handle everything immediately. Catherine then called down to the kitchen to speak with Cook personally. Mrs. Henderson had been with the royal household for over 15 years and knew exactly what would please Prince Alexander after his long journey. Roast lamb with rosemary and his favorite lemon cake for dessert, Mrs. Henderson said immediately. And I'll make sure we have plenty of fresh bread and that special honey butter he likes. The prince will feel properly welcome home. Next, Catherine made her way to the nursery wing where the children were having their morning lessons. She found them in the playroom with their governess, Miss Sarah, working on their reading. Isabella looked up hopefully as her mother entered. Mama, is there news from Papa? Isabella asked, setting down her book. Catherine smiled mysteriously. There might be some exciting news very soon. But first, I need you all to practice being very good listeners. The children exchanged curious glances, and James bounced excitedly in his chair. Is Papa coming home early? Is that the surprise? You'll find out soon enough, Catherine said, kissing each of their heads. Miss Sarah, could you perhaps take the children outside to play in the garden around lunchtime? I think they could use some fresh air. Miss Sarah, who had been with the family long enough to recognize when something special was happening, nodded knowingly. Of course, Your Grace. The weather is perfect for outdoor activities. Catherine spent the rest of the morning making final preparations. She changed into Alexander's favorite dress, a soft green one that brought out her eyes, and had her hair styled simply but elegantly. She wanted to look beautiful for his return, but also natural and comfortable the way he preferred. As the morning progressed, Catherine found herself checking the time constantly. Alexander's flight should have landed by now, which meant he was probably in the car driving home. Her excitement was building to an almost unbearable level, and she realized she felt as nervous as she had when they were first dating. The staff had been quietly informed of the prince's early return, and there was a buzz of excited energy throughout the palace. Fresh flowers had been arranged in all the main rooms, and Catherine could smell the delicious aromas coming from the kitchen as Cook prepared Alexander's favorite homecoming meal. Just after noon, Catherine received a text message from Alexander. 20 minutes away. Can't wait to see you all. Her heart began pounding with anticipation. After 3 weeks apart, Alexander would finally be home. She positioned herself in the main entrance hall where she would have a clear view of the front drive, though she planned to let the children discover their father's return on their own. Catherine checked her appearance one last time in the large mirror near the entrance and took a deep breath. In just a few minutes, her husband would walk through those doors, and their family would be complete again. The surprise homecoming was about to become a memory they would treasure forever. Through the tall windows, She could see the children playing happily in the garden with Miss Sarah, completely unaware that their beloved father was about to surprise them. The scene was perfect for the reunion Catherine had been dreaming about for weeks. The waiting was almost over. Soon, Prince Alexander would be home where he belonged, and the palace would be filled with joy and laughter once again. Catherine smiled to herself, thinking about how much love and happiness was about to unfold in the next few precious moments. Hashtag the homecoming surprise. Catherine's hands trembled slightly as she smoothed her dress and positioned herself near the grand entrance of Rosewood Palace. Through the ornate windows, she could see the children playing an animated game of tag in the garden, their laughter carrying on the warm afternoon breeze. Miss Sarah was reading under the old oak tree, keeping a watchful eye on her charges while allowing them the freedom to run and play. The sound of tires on gravel made Catherine's heart leap. She moved closer to the window and saw the familiar black sedan pulling through the palace gates. Her breath caught as she spotted Alexander's profile in the passenger seat. After 3 long weeks, he was finally here, finally home. Catherine quickly stepped back from the window, not wanting Alexander to see her waiting. She wanted him to have the joy of surprising the children first, though she knew she would have to contain her own excitement while watching the reunion unfold. Her plan was to observe from inside the palace, then step out at just the right moment to welcome her husband home properly. The car came to a smooth stop at the main entrance, and Catherine watched through a side window as the driver came around to open Alexander's door. Prince Alexander emerged from the vehicle looking travel-weary, but eager, his usual diplomatic composure replaced by barely contained excitement. He wore a navy suit that was slightly wrinkled from the journey, and his dark hair was a bit disheveled, but to Catherine he looked absolutely perfect. Alexander thanked his driver and security detail, then paused to look around the palace grounds. His gaze moved toward the garden where the children's voices could still be heard, and Catherine saw his face light up with pure joy. He handed his briefcase to a waiting footman and walked quietly toward the garden, clearly planning to surprise his children. Catherine moved to a different window that gave her a better view of the garden. She pressed her hand to the glass, her heart racing as she prepared to witness the reunion she had been dreaming about for weeks. Alexander approached the garden quietly, staying behind the large hedgerow that would conceal him from the children's view. 8-year-old Princess Isabella was in the middle of explaining the rules of their game to her younger brothers when she suddenly stopped mid-sentence. Something had caught her attention, perhaps a shadow or movement that seemed out of place. She turned toward the hedgerow with a puzzled expression. "James, Thomas, did you hear something?" Isabella asked, her natural caution as the eldest child making her alert to changes in their environment. 6-year-old Prince James stopped running and listened carefully. "I don't hear anything different," he said, but he moved closer to his sister protectively. 3-year-old Prince Thomas was less concerned with mysterious sounds and more interested in the butterfly that had just landed on a nearby flower. "Look, Bella," he called to his sister, pointing excitedly at the colorful wings. Alexander chose that moment to step out from behind the hedgerow, and the effect was magical. Isabella saw him first, and her reaction was everything Catherine could have hoped for. The little girl's eyes went wide, then filled with tears of joy, and she let out a shriek that could probably be heard 3 counties away. "Papa!" Isabella screamed, dropping the flower crown she had been making and running toward her father at full speed. James looked up from where he had been examining a ladybug and took a moment to process what he was seeing. Then, his face broke into the biggest grin Catherine had ever seen, and he joined his sister's mad dash across the garden. "Papa's home! Papa's home!" James shouted, his voice cracking with emotion and excitement. Little Thomas, still focused on the butterfly, looked up to see what all the commotion was about. When he spotted his father, he simply stood there for a moment with his mouth hanging open, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. Alexander knelt down just in time to catch Isabella and James as they launched themselves into his arms. The force of their enthusiastic greeting nearly knocked him over, but he held them tightly, burying his face in their hair and breathing in the sweet scent of his children. "My darling ones," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Oh, how I've missed you both." Isabella pulled back to look at her father's face, her small hands framing his cheeks. "Papa, you're really here. You're not supposed to be home until Thursday. I finished my work early because I couldn't bear to be away from my precious children any longer," Alexander explained, kissing her forehead tenderly. James was practically vibrating with excitement. "Papa, I wore your old cap every single night, and I told everyone at school that my papa is a real prince, and that he's the bravest person in the whole world." "And you told them correctly," Alexander said, ruffling James's hair affectionately. "You've been taking good care of your mama and siblings while I was away, haven't you?" "Yes, sir. I've been the man of the house, just like you taught me," James said proudly, puffing out his small chest. Thomas finally overcame his surprise and toddled over to his father, reaching up with both arms. Papa, up!" Alexander scooped his youngest son into the family embrace, and Thomas immediately wrapped his chubby arms around his father's neck and refused to let go. "Missed you, Papa," Thomas said in his sweet, lisping voice. "And I missed you too, my little prince," Alexander replied, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Every single day I was gone, I thought about coming home to my wonderful children." Miss Sarah approached the family reunion with a warm smile. "Your Royal Highness, what a lovely surprise. The children have been asking about your return every single day. Thank you for taking such good care of them, Miss Sarah," Alexander said gratefully. "I can see they've been well looked after in my absence." Isabella suddenly gasped and grabbed her father's hand. "Papa, you have to see the picture I drew for you, and the story I wrote, and the flower I pressed between the pages of my journal, and I learned a new song on the piano," James added excitedly. "Miss Sarah says I'm getting really good at it. I want to hear and see everything," Alexander assured them. "But first, where is your mama? I've missed her most of all." Catherine felt her cue had arrived. She had been watching the reunion with tears streaming down her face, her heart so full of love and happiness that she felt it might burst. Now it was time for her own reunion with a man she had missed so desperately. She stepped out of the palace and walked across the garden with as much dignity as she could muster, though every instinct told her to run straight into Alexander's arms. As she approached, Alexander gently set Thomas down and stood up, his eyes locked on hers. The children seemed to sense the importance of this moment between their parents. They stepped back slightly, but remained close, wanting to be part of the reunion, but understanding that their mama and papa needed a moment for themselves. "Hello, my love," Alexander said softly, his voice filled with all the emotion of their 3 weeks apart. "Welcome home," Catherine replied, her own voice barely above a whisper. Alexander crossed the small distance between them and pulled Catherine into his arms, holding her as if he never intended to let her go again. Catherine melted into his embrace, feeling complete for the first time in weeks. She could feel his heartbeat against her chest, could smell his familiar cologne mixed with the scent of travel, could feel the solid strength of him that had been missing from her life for far too long. "I love you," Alexander murmured into her ear. "Thank you for being everything to our children while I was away. Thank you for being the anchor that holds our family together." Catherine pulled back to look into his eyes, her hands resting on his chest. "I love you too, and you're home now. That's all that matters." The children, unable to contain themselves any longer, rejoined the embrace, turning it into a proper family reunion. Cook had appeared at the kitchen window and was wiping her eyes with her apron. Several other staff members had found excuses to be near windows or doorways, all of them smiling at the heartwarming scene. "Are you hungry, Papa?" Isabella asked practically. "Cook has been making your favorite foods since Mama told her you were coming home early." "I'm absolutely starving," Alexander admitted. "Airplane food is terrible, and I've been dreaming about Cook's roast lamb for days." "Can we eat lunch in the garden?" James asked hopefully. "It's such a beautiful day, and we want to stay close to you." "That sounds perfect," Catherine said. Lady Margaret can have the staff set up a table under the oak tree. As the family made their way toward the palace, Alexander kept one arm around Catherine and held Thomas's hand with the other, while Isabella and James chattered excitedly on either side of him. He looked like a man who had found his way home after a long journey, which, Catherine reflected, was exactly what he was. The surprise homecoming had exceeded all of Catherine's expectations. The joy on the children's faces, the emotion in Alexander's voice, the feeling of completeness that settled over their family like a warm blanket. It was everything she had hoped for, and more. As they approached the palace steps, Alexander suddenly stopped and turned to face his family. You know what? Before we go inside, I want to remember this moment exactly as it is. My beautiful wife, my wonderful children, my home. This is what I thought about every day I was away. Catherine smiled up at her husband, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. The surprise was perfect. The reunion was everything they had dreamed of, and now their family was whole again. The afternoon stretched ahead of them, filled with laughter, stories, and the simple joy of being together. And in that perfect moment, with the sun shining down on them and their children's laughter filling the air, Catherine knew that no matter how many diplomatic missions might take Alexander away in the future, this feeling, this love, this completeness, this home, would always bring him back to where he belonged. #family moments and palace life. The afternoon sun filtered through the ancient oak tree as the royal family settled around the impromptu lunch table that Lady Margaret had arranged. With remarkable efficiency, the palace staff had transformed a simple garden meal into something magical, with fine china, crystal glasses, and Catherine's favorite white roses as centerpieces. Yet despite the elegant setting, the atmosphere was wonderfully relaxed and intimate. Alexander had changed from his travel clothes into comfortable casual wear, dark jeans, and a white button-down shirt that Catherine particularly loved on him. He looked refreshed and happy, though she could still see traces of exhaustion around his eyes from the long weeks of diplomatic work and travel. Cook had outdone herself with the homecoming feast. The roast lamb was perfectly seasoned with rosemary and garlic, accompanied by roasted vegetables from the palace gardens and Alexander's favorite Yorkshire puddings. The smell alone was enough to make everyone's mouth water, but for Alexander, who had been surviving on formal diplomatic dinners and airplane meals, it was nothing short of paradise. "This is exactly what I dreamed about," Alexander said, taking his first bite of the lamb. "Cook, you've made me the happiest man in the kingdom." Cook, who had been hovering nearby to ensure everything was perfect, beamed with pride. "It's our pleasure, Your Royal Highness. Welcome home." As the family enjoyed their meal, the children took turns sharing everything that had happened during their father's absence. Isabella pulled out a carefully folded piece of paper from her pocket, the drawing she had mentioned earlier. "Papa, I drew this picture of our family," she said, unfolding it to reveal a colorful scene of the 5 of them standing in front of the palace. "See, there's you in your prince uniform, and Mama in her pretty blue dress, and all of us children. I drew it the day after you left because I missed you so much." Alexander studied the drawing with the serious attention he would give to an important state document. "Isabella, this is absolutely beautiful. Look at the detail you put into the palace windows, and you even remembered the flag on the tower. This is definitely going in my office where I can see it every day." Isabella glowed with pride at her father's praise, while James bounced impatiently in his seat, eager to share his own news. Papa, guess what? I lost my first tooth," James announced, grinning to show the gap where his front tooth used to be. "The tooth fairy gave me a whole pound coin, and Miss Sarah helped me write a letter to tell you about it." "A whole pound?" Alexander exclaimed, appropriately impressed. "That's quite a generous tooth fairy. You must have been very brave when it came out." James said proudly. "I didn't cry at all. Mama said you would be proud of me for being so brave." "I'm incredibly proud of you," Alexander confirmed, ruffling his son's hair. "Losing your first tooth is a very important milestone." Thomas, not wanting to be left out of the conversation, climbed down from his chair and went to stand next to his father. "Papa, look, he said, performing a little hop that he had clearly been practicing. I can jump like a frog. Alexander watched Thomas's enthusiastic but somewhat uncoordinated jumps with delight. That's excellent jumping, Thomas. You've grown so much while I was away. Soon you'll be tall enough to reach the doorknobs, all by yourself. Catherine watched these interactions with deep contentment. This was what she had missed most during Alexander's absence. Not just his presence, but the way he connected with each child individually, making them all feel special and loved. His ability to give each child exactly the attention they craved was one of the things she admired most about him as a father. Tell me about your official duties while I was away, Alexander said to Catherine as the children returned to their meal. I saw some wonderful photos in the press of your hospital visit and the Children's Center opening. The Children's Center was particularly special, Catherine said, her eyes lighting up as she recalled the event. They have a wonderful program for children with learning difficulties, and the staff there is doing incredible work. I've already spoken with Lady Margaret about arranging additional support from our charitable foundation. That sounds exactly like the kind of project you excel at, Alexander said warmly. You have such a gift for connecting with people and understanding what they really need. Their conversation was interrupted by Isabella, who had been thinking deeply about something. Papa, why do you have to go away for work? Can't other people do the diplomatic meetings? It was a question that Alexander had clearly considered many times himself. He set down his fork and gave Isabella his full attention. That's a very thoughtful question, my darling, he said. You see, when you're born into a royal family, you have special responsibilities to help your country and its people. Sometimes that means traveling to meet with other leaders to discuss important matters that affect everyone in our kingdom. But we're important too, James pointed out with 6-year-old logic. We're your family. You are absolutely the most important thing in my world, Alexander assured him. That's why I work so hard to finish my duties quickly so I can come home to you. And that's why I was able to surprise you today, because I missed you all so much that I couldn't bear to stay away any longer than necessary. Catherine felt her heart swell with love as she listened to Alexander explain his responsibilities to their children. He managed to help them understand the importance of duty and service while still affirming how much they meant to him. It was a delicate balance that he handled with remarkable grace. Lady Margaret appeared at the edge of the garden, clearly hesitant to interrupt the family time, but needing to speak with Catherine about something urgent. Your Grace, I do apologize for the interruption, but there's been a call from the Children's Hospital. They were hoping you might be able to visit tomorrow instead of Friday, as they have a young patient who specifically requested to meet you. Catherine looked to Alexander, silently asking his opinion. She had been looking forward to spending uninterrupted time with him, but she also understood the importance of her charitable work. Of course you should go, Alexander said immediately. In fact, if my schedule allows it, perhaps I could accompany you. It's been too long since we've done a joint engagement. That would be wonderful, Catherine said, then turned to Lady Margaret. Please let them know I'll be there tomorrow morning, and inquire if it would be appropriate for Prince Alexander to join me. After Lady Margaret left, the family lingered over their meal, no one wanting the magical afternoon to end. Alexander shared stories from his diplomatic mission, carefully editing them to be appropriate for young ears, while still giving the children a sense of the important work he had been doing. I met with the president of Meridia, he told them. Their country has some of the most beautiful mountains I've ever seen, and they're working very hard to protect their environment. We discussed ways our kingdom could help them with conservation efforts. Did you see any animals? Thomas asked, his 3-year-old mind immediately focusing on the most interesting part of the story. I saw some magnificent eagles, Alexander said. They were soaring around the mountain peaks, and the president told me they're a symbol of freedom in his country. As the afternoon wore on, the children gradually grew quieter, the excitement of their father's return mixing with the peaceful contentment of family time. Isabella leaned against Alexander's chair, occasionally reaching out to touch his arm as if reassuring herself that he was really there. James had moved his chair closer to his father's, and Thomas had claimed a spot on Alexander's lap despite having his own perfectly good chair. Catherine observed this scene with deep satisfaction. This was what their family was meant to be, together, relaxed, happy, and secure in their love for each other. The formal duties and public obligations that fill their lives were important, but moments like these were what truly mattered. "I have an idea," Alexander announced suddenly. "Since this is my first day back, and since it's such a beautiful afternoon, why don't we take a walk through the palace gardens? I want to see what's been growing while I was away, and I think we could all use some fresh air after that delicious meal." The children immediately perked up with enthusiasm for this plan. Isabella ran to get her flower identification book so she could show her father all the new blooms that had appeared in the rose garden. James wanted to demonstrate his improved cricket bowling technique, and Thomas was excited to show off his ability to feed the ducks at the palace pond. As they prepared to leave the lunch table, Alexander caught Catherine's hand and squeezed it gently. "Thank you for this perfect homecoming," he said quietly. "I couldn't have imagined anything more wonderful." "Thank you for coming home early," Catherine replied. "Seeing you with the children again, seeing their faces light up, it's everything I hoped for." They stood together for a moment, watching their 3 children chase butterflies around the oak tree, their laughter mixing with the gentle sounds of the palace gardens. In a few hours, reality would intrude again with schedules and duties and obligations. But for now, they had this perfect afternoon, this precious time when they were simply a family enjoying being together. Alexander wrapped his arm around Catherine's waist, and she leaned into his solid presence. "Shall we go explore our kingdom, my love?" he asked with a smile. "Lead the way, my prince," Catherine replied, and together they followed their children into the golden afternoon sunlight, their hearts full of gratitude for the gift of home and family and love that surrounded them.